Scripture that's been used to hurt you but shouldn't have, part 10. Jeremiah 17:9 says that the heart is desperately sick and deceitful and no one can help it. And verses like this have been used to create a theology of like wormism, the idea that you're despicable and everything you do is terrible and you can't trust yourself or your conscience. And actually, if you go to like the National Association of Evangelicals website, they have an article on capital punishment. And they have this line that says, even if you find capital punishment despicable and morally distasteful and revolting, that's not a good enough reason to say no to it. And that's sort of like a whole theology of you can't trust yourself, can't trust your conscience, you can't trust your internal voice. Let us, the church, tell you what to believe instead. And Jeremiah 17:9 is a verse that's used to prop up this sort of theology. The heart's deceitful, and at your very core, you are awful and you can't trust yourself. Now, there's lots of things wrong with this. Why not start with theology? Like Jesus says, you are the light of the world. Why not start with Genesis 1? You're created in the image of God. And Jeremiah 17:9 might not even say that in the first place. So Hebrew Bible is often translated from something called the Masoretic text into English. Masoretic text is great. We have lots of reasons to trust it. And the oldest fragments and manuscripts that we have from it come from like the 800s CE, so hundreds and hundreds of years after Jeremiah was written. And then we have the Septuagint. The Septuagint is a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, so it is one language away from the original. But our oldest documentation of it comes from 1 or 2 centuries before Christ, BCE, before the Common Era. And it says that the human heart, not that it's deceitful, but rather that it is deep, that it is difficult to understand. Who can unpeel all of the layers of it? And then Jeremiah continues on, like, well, God can. God can understand it. But it's not deceitful. It's not that it's so wrong and so evil, and who could possibly trust the evil human heart, but rather that the human heart is deep, that it is profound, that it is difficult to understand. But even that God can understand, which is a completely different way of looking at the human heart, not as just like utterly corruptible and awful and irredeemably terrible, but rather deep and profound and difficult to understand. And I think this sets a different sort of trajectory of how we understand our own consciences. Not that we rely on them alone. I believe that we need a community of people in order to build like a system of ethics and understanding. But we also don't need to pass on a theology that says whatever you think in your heart is deceitful and you need authority figures to tell you what to think otherwise. I just don't think that's helpful.